This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you so much for joining us on this Tuesday, June 13th, 2021. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, chaos in Cuba, the president promising to stand by the Cuban people as they protest against their communist government, and Republicans saying the U.S. must stand firm.
We have to make sure that their message today and every day moving forward isn't lost, and that the true nature of this barbaric regime is exposed.
We'll tell you how dissent has been brewing in the church in Cuba for months. Could your electric power supply be at risk of failing due to a cyber attack or a solar storm?
Vulnerable across the board to natural and man-made threats to our electrical grid system that could render it unrepairable in our lifetime.
We'll look at what needs to be done to strengthen our vulnerable power supply. As the U.S. withdraws from Afghanistan, the concerns over the persecution of Christians and other religious believers in that country, and a well-known evangelist and motivational speaker beginning his own bank which will support pro-life efforts. All those stories and more are ahead in today's edition of CBN NewsWatch. We begin this half hour with the chaos in Cuba. Cuban police are out in force as the people there are fed up with their communist government and taking to the streets to demand change like we haven't seen in years. The White House says America stands with the Cuban people. National security correspondent Caitlin Burke has the details.
Chanting phrases like "we are no longer afraid" and "we want freedom," Cubans took to the streets over the weekend demanding change from their government. They also garnered quick support from areas like Miami's Little Havana.
As the island nation suffers economic crisis, citizens are dealing with shortages of medicine and electricity, plus waiting hours in line just for food and job opportunities. Cuban-American Senator Marco Rubio says ultimately what the people want is freedom, tweeting, quote, "Socialism promises guaranteed food, medicine, and income if you give up your freedom. When, as always, it fails to deliver, you don't get your freedom back. That's why protesters are chanting Libertad." These protests are the largest seen in Cuba since 1994. Dr. Teo Baboon, a Cuban-American entrepreneur and philanthropist, tells CBN News that he's not surprised. Dissent has been brewing in the church for months.
The evangelical community and the Catholic community begin to see a tremendous amount of publishing taking place in social media, demanding that the government pay attention to the tremendous amount of hurt that was taking place.
In a show of solidarity, about 5,000 people flooded Miami's streets near Little Havana Sunday. And in a Monday statement, President Biden expressed support as well, saying, quote, "The Cuban people are bravely asserting fundamental and universal rights. Those rights, including the right of peaceful protest and the right to freely determine their own future, must be respected." Dr. Baboon says now is the time for the Biden administration to take action.
They should start a dialogue with the Cuban government to stop them, to have them stop, or else further sanctions should be introduced against the Cuban government.
Senator Rubio wants the communist regime held accountable for decades of repression.
We have to make sure that their message today and every day moving forward isn't lost, and that the true nature of this barbaric regime is exposed.
Cuba's president blames U.S. sanctions, the pandemic, and the so-called Cuban-American mafia that he says waged social media campaigns calling for demonstrations. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
President Biden is set to deliver a speech on voting rights today. The speech in Philadelphia is intended to be the beginning of a public pressure campaign in response to measures enacted by states on election reform. Democrats call them voter suppression, but Republicans say they're protecting election integrity. House and Senate Democrats have put forth an election reform bill, but Republicans call it a power grab, taking responsibility for elections away from states and giving it to the federal government. The deadline for U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan is set for the end of August, and religious minorities in the region, including Christians, are bracing for even more violence by the Taliban and other Islamic extremist groups. Jennifer Wishon brings us that story.
Since May, the Taliban has seized about a quarter of Afghanistan's districts. Now Christians are asking for prayer as they and other religious minorities find themselves easy targets of extremists.
The withdrawal will make these vulnerable communities even more vulnerable. It's as simple as that.
Security conditions have failed religious minorities as Islamic extremists run roughshod across the country.
They all are under fairly serious attack by extremist groups, particularly ISIS-K and the Taliban.
The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom discussed the plight of non-Sunni Muslim Afghans. The Sikh population is nearly extinct, dropping from 250,000 in the 1990s to just 200 today.
It's devastating. And the houses of worship, the guardaras of the Sikh community are constantly destroyed. Religious services are attacked.
Women and girls are heavily traumatized. Young girls have limited or no education. Families worry about their future prospects.
The commission recommends U.S.-injected protections for religious freedom in peace negotiations between the Taliban and Afghan government. Add Afghanistan to the State Department's special watch list for tolerating violations of religious freedom, and put U.S. tax dollars towards specifically protecting religious minorities.
When we hear Taliban spokespeople discussing plans to Islamize the country, the international community needs to recognize the vulnerability that minorities are exposed.
As U.S. service members pack up their gear, leaders aren't optimistic. This graphic video reportedly showing Taliban fighters firing on Afghan soldiers in the north.
We're starting to create conditions here that won't look good for Afghanistan in the future if there's a push for a military takeover.
So far, the U.S.-Afghan deal hasn't led to peace. Religious freedom advocates hope keeping a spotlight on the situation will help. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News.
And here at home, a group of protesters who claim to be artists are boasting a statement they hung over a statue of Jesus. The banner reads, "God bless abortions." It was hung over the Christ of the Ozarks statue in Eureka Springs. They said it was in response to the attempt to reduce abortions in Arkansas and throughout the South. KNWA News reports the group dressed up to resemble construction workers, then snuck onto the property to hang that banner. Randall Christie, the curator of the monument, said, "Lord help them. Maybe he'll somehow touch them and make them realize how bad that message really is." Christie plans to press charges for trespassing and vandalism. Now, for more on this story, simply go to cbnnews.com. Coming up, the multiple threats to the U.S. power grid, from cyber attacks to solar storms, why you could unexpectedly find yourself without electricity. It may sound like something out of a movie, but it is all too real, and we're going to explain why when we come back.
I am Regent's first ROTC graduate student.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Wednesday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel.
How'd you like to get a redo on your health, on your body, on your arteries, so you could have the energy you had 20 years ago? The great news is you can. I'm Dr. Mike Roizen, chair of the Wellness Institute at the Cleveland Clinic. I've written 4 New York Times bestsellers. But even better than having to read all that, you can listen to this DVD and watch it. Protect your heart? Yes, you can. Here's how.
Go to CBN.com or call 1-800-700-7000 for your free copy of Protect Your Heart. Let the medical experts show you their new discoveries on how to avoid heart disease and even reverse it. Easy steps to uncover the hidden dangers in your medicine cabinet, reduce stress, and get a complete do-over for your health. Call 1-800-700-7000. That's 1-800-700-7000. Or go to CBN.com to claim your free copy of Protect Your Heart.
North Korea has a weapon so powerful it could wipe out America's electric grid, and cyber criminals are routinely launching sophisticated hacks against electricity plants. All this as weather experts warn of catastrophic solar storms that could fry our nation's power supply. So how do we keep the lights on in America? George Thomas shows us what needs to happen.
From natural phenomena to cyber hacks, like the massive SolarWinds operation and recent attack to the Colonial gas pipeline, security experts warn it's clear that most businesses and key infrastructure, like power grids across this country, are woefully unprepared to meet such threats.
They went after our gas and they went after our hot dogs. No one is out of bounds here. Everyone is in play.
Lawmakers like Senator Bob Hall of Texas also worry that means hackers could be just a few keystrokes away from turning the lights out in cities around our country.
We are certainly vulnerable across the board to natural and man-made threats to our electrical grid system that could render it unrepairable in our lifetime.
Hall tells CBN News that he's especially concerned about an electronic magnetic pulse, or EMP, attack against the grid.
It entails simply one small nuclear weapon being detonated above the central part of the United States over Nebraska, Kansas area would put out create a pulse from coast to coast and border to border that would totally annihilate our electric system.
There's really no excuse for the country to be vulnerable to EMP.
Dr. Peter Pry, a former CIA intelligence officer, sits on the Department of Homeland Security's EMP task force. He's out with a report this week concluding that North Korea is now in possession of EMP weapons so strong that no electric grid could survive from such an attack.
North Korea almost certainly has developed super EMP weapons. These are nuclear weapons that are specialized to produce extraordinarily powerful electromagnetic pulse effects, and it would make it, along with Russia and China, one of the few nations in the world that has these weapons.
San Antonio, Texas is now leading the nation's efforts to defend against such electromagnetic threats. In collaboration with the Air Force's Joint Base San Antonio, retired Brigadier General Guy Walsh, along with teams of researchers, scientists, and security experts, are studying grid vulnerabilities and deploying measures to protect them from getting fried. For obvious security reasons, Walsh won't divulge specifics, but says their goal is
to really look across the board at training, at education, and the technologies that are going to help make the electrical grid both resilient to attack, but able to recover more quickly.
Meanwhile, grid operators in some regions of the country are also heeding warnings to prepare for solar storms and sunspots blasting particles into space, called coronal mass ejections. William Murtaugh's group at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, maintains a direct line with all the electric companies in the event of a geomagnetic eruption.
When we see one of these large eruptions occurring on the sun and what we call a coronal mass ejection coming towards Earth, we initiate this hotline call and we make communication with essentially the entire grid, owners and operators across the nation.
Researchers with the U.S. Geological Survey released this map last year showing grid systems in the Midwest and Eastern Seaboard that are particularly vulnerable to solar storms. Murtaugh says electricity operators are now constantly assessing areas of vulnerability.
If there's vulnerability to certain equipment, maybe they can modify that equipment, the manufacturing of that equipment, to make it hardened, to make it better protected against the geomagnetic storm. There are many different actions they can take to ensure that the grid stays up and running during these big geomagnetic storms.
Still, the big challenge is that many of America's electricity systems weren't designed or built with the thought of being protected against cyber threats or EMP attacks.
The systems themselves are very antiquated. They're very old. Security is very difficult to do on these types of devices. And we've seen in prior attacks where Russia has infiltrated our power grid from a military preparedness perspective, which means in the event that there is a conflict, could Russia impact our grid?
Former NSA hacker David Kennedy tells CBN News that only a few of them are even prepared to handle today's level of hacking sophistication, especially those attacks coming from China.
China is very pressing because they have a very long-term view. They're very focused on intellectual property theft, as well as their military capabilities from a cyber warfare perspective. I mean, they're handing it to us here in the United States from a cyber warfare perspective, and they're definitely scary.
The energy industry is the third most targeted sector for cyber criminals, behind only finance and manufacturing. And according to the Energy Department, hackers have the capability to shut down America's power grid.
There are very malign actors who are trying, even as we speak. There are thousands of attacks on all aspects of the energy sector and the private sector generally.
Studies about costs run the gamut, from more than $25 billion a year to protect the grid to as much as $7 trillion to upgrade and modernize the whole system. A new survey this week from the nonpartisan group Protect Our Power found a majority of people support more federal funding to secure our nation's electric grid ahead of potential catastrophe.
It so often is the case when we face challenges or threats on the horizon, we're better off dealing with it before it hits as opposed to after it hits.
George Thomas, CBN News.
Still ahead, a mother who experienced the terrible grief of losing her 2 children in a terrible car crash and her sister as well. We're going to hear how she turned her pain into purpose right after this.
Daddy?
Yeah, buddy.
How many nickels are in a dollar?
There are 20 nickels in a dollar.
How do birds fly? Does milk really make my bones stronger?
Yeah.
Daddy, when we die, will we go to heaven?
Do you have the answer to life's biggest question? Call the 700 Club. We'll help you find answers to the important questions life brings your way.
Watch breaking news, in-depth exclusive stories and programs from health to entertainment you won't find anywhere else. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Enjoy credible news reporting from around the world. Discover inspiring programs and stories of hope, all in one place from a Christian perspective. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. To watch the CBN News Channel, download the app or visit cbnnewschannel.com.
Hello, I'm Dr. David Perlmutter, board-certified neurologist and #1 New York Times bestselling author. Wouldn't it be great to boost your energy, eliminate brain fog, and even reverse brain disease? Well, you can, and I'm going to show you how, along with some of the world's most well-respected brain experts in this DVD, Protect Your Brain.
Get Protect Your Brain, a free DVD only from the Christian Broadcasting Network, featuring experts on the cutting edge of neuroscience and brain health.
No matter how many times you've failed in the past, you really can do this.
In Protect Your Brain, you'll discover simple strategies to keep your brain young and healthy. Improve your memory. Discover the gut-brain connection. In Protect Your Brain, get your free copy at cbn.com or call 1-800-700-7000.
If you want to improve the quality of your life, get the DVD Protect Your Brain and get it today.
Angela Alexander knows what it's like to suffer loss. She experienced the nightmare of losing her 2 sons being killed in a tragic accident. The grief was at times unbearable, but with her faith, Angela has overcome her anguish, and now she's helping others weather the storms of life as well. She writes about her story in her new book, Miracles in Action, Turning Pain into Power and Grief into Peace. The book is now the subject of a documentary, and it's impacted the lives of people around the world. She told CBN's The Prayer Link program how she found hope in tragedy.
you have really suffered your share of loss. Back in 1996, your sister was killed at the hands of your own brother. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Yes. Well, my brother, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia since the age of 12. And he was in and out of jail and mental institutions. And they let him out of jail one time without his medication. And when you're hearing voices, unfortunately, he took drugs to calm the voices. And, you know, at the time he was staying with my sister, and they had an agreement that he would go stay at a shelter on the weekends while she had her children. And one day he just decided that he didn't see the need to leave. And you know what? I never even really read the whole report on her injuries because I just can't handle it. But what did help me was a year after she passed at the trial, they released her evidence to me. And inside of her purse, folded down like she was hiding her last $5 bill, was a letter she wrote to God about a week before she passed. And the first sentence eliminated all of the grief that I had carried for the year. Wow. It read, "Hello, dear God, it's me, Alice. I need you and I can't handle my affairs without you." Wow. And that sentence just gave me so much peace because at that moment I knew that it wasn't about me, and therefore it wasn't about my brother David. It was about her relationship with God, and they decided for her to go home.
It's beautiful. Well, you say losing your sister actually prepared you for the loss of your two sons just 4 years later. Tell us how that, what happened.
Yes, because when my sister passed, my older sister gave me this song by Patti LaBelle titled "Love Never Dies." And we played that song all day, every day. Everybody in my family knew every word of that song, "Love Never Dies." And when I didn't know that, it was preparing me for the death of my sons. So when I was in Japan on military duty, my husband and 4 children were driving down a highway in California and a car cut them off. And at that time, I was in Japan on duty, and my Lieutenant Mavechi came up to me and says, "Alexander, I need to speak with you." Well, it was April Fool's weekend, so I thought it was another joke. And we just started walking and talking about nothing, and we ended up at the door of the small office, and inside was a man who was introduced as a priest. And he started nervously shaking, holding this paperwork from the Red Cross, and he says, "Angela, your family has been in a car accident." And from the looks on their faces, I knew this was no April Fool's joke.
Yeah.
A car had cut my family off. A car fell 25 feet off the highway and landed upside down on top of 2 other parked vehicles with people inside those cars. Praise God, they were okay. However, my 2 8-year-old sons passed instantly at the scene.
Wow.
And since then, I've written my autobiography titled "Miracles in Action, Turning Pain into Power and Grief into Peace." And it's titled that because although Maurice and Roger passed instantly, God allowed both of them to write and leave behind these incredible goodbye letters. Maurice didn't know about Roger's letter. Roger definitely did not know about Maurice's letter. They individually listened to the Holy Spirit and obeyed.
Wow.
And I'm telling you, while I was writing my son's memorial program, that's when God said, "Angela, all 3 letters were written to soothe your soul,
my God,
but more importantly, to share."
So
and I was laughing because I said, that's when the arguments began. I was like, "Oh no, God."
Right.
Wow.
What I'm not going to do is talk about this every time somebody asks me because I couldn't even say their names without a lump in my throat.
Yes.
But they were so young, Angela. What did they put in those letters that gave you such peace?
Maurice, he was in the 3rd grade. About a month before the car crash, he had a math test, finished early, received his A. Now he had to be quiet while his classmates completed their test. And he wrote 3 pages, not only expressing that he loved us, but explaining why he loved us. And all 3 pages, he wrote the words, "bye-bye," BY-BY, not BYE, the bye that we'll see each other again in passing. And I'm telling you, this letter meant more to me than any amount of money anybody could have willed.
Wow.
Because peace is priceless. And that's what it gave me.
Peace is indeed priceless. You can catch the rest of Angela's powerful story on the CBN's prayer link. You can catch it on the CBN News Channel this evening. It begins at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time. Once again, you can find that on the CBN News Channel or the CBN News app. Coming up, why a well-known evangelist and motivational speaker, Nick Vujicic, is starting a bank that will support pro-life efforts after facing backlash from other financial institutions. We're going to explain that story for you when we come back. Stay with us.
Hey, if you're tired and exhausted all day, you can't think clearly, and you really just need a cup or even a pot of coffee to get through your day, then join me, Dr. Josh Axe, for this new series where I'm going to teach you how to transform your diet and use essential oils and supplements to get a better night's sleep.
Wake up to your best life. Call 1-800-700-7000 to get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
It's about the competition.
I kind of put that pressure on myself, and I think people had expectations.
It's about overcoming.
We use this phrase all the time, keep chopping, keep practicing hard.
It's about going the distance.
You know, I think as a father, it's my job, to lead. Just be the best husband and father I can be.
Watch Going the Distance with Sean Brown Saturday night at 7:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Orphans Promise is committed to loving and serving at-risk children, to helping keep families together, and to creating opportunities for strong and sustainable communities around the world. We're working in over 60 countries around the world, and with your help, we can do even more. There's an old African proverb I love that says, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together. At Orphans Promise, we want to run far so we can touch the lives of as many orphaned and vulnerable children as possible. But we don't want to go alone. We're out to change the world, one child, one family, one community at a time. Will you join us?
Evangelist and motivational speaker Nick Vujicic is planning to start a bank that supports pro-life efforts after learning many financial institutions donate to organizations that endorse abortions. Vujicic was born without arms and legs, and he told the Epoch Times he began speaking out against abortion in 2019, and within 16 weeks he was receiving threats, including a grenade at his home. He also got kicked out of a bank. But Vujicic, who has an extensive financial background, pushed ahead, and he says he's hoping to spread a positive message about protecting the sanctity of life at all ages. You can read this full story at cbnnews.com. Before we say goodbye, it is time for your Tuesday Tweetable. I pray this message will bless you and encourage you to post, tag, tweet, and share it with others. If you need a blessing, be a blessing. Shifting the focus from you gives you more than you give away. Scripture says it best, give and it shall be given unto you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over shall he cause men to give unto you. With that word, I encourage you to make this a terrific Tuesday. That will do it for this edition of CBN Newswatch. You can always find more of our programs on the CBN News Channel at any time, as well as online at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can email us, newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.